it's just going a bit too far, particularly when historically those regulations were not something in U.S. history.
Grace, it comes down to this. In most states, to get a carry permit, you have to meet objective criteria. No criminal record, no mental or substance abuse issues.
The Supreme Court overturning New York State's guidelines on concealed guns in public.
Having to show historically, have you had situations where people may have been trying to harm you?
But New York adds subjective criteria. Do you face special danger that justifies carrying a pistol?
They found that New York's regulatory structure just went well beyond the constitutional protection.
New York's arms laws. In 2018, Joseph Sauer sought permission from the New York City Police Department's licensing division to possess rifles and shotguns in his residence. The following year, he applied for a permit to have arms in his home. Both applications were denied in 2019, citing various sections of the city's rules. Sauer's prior arrests, driving history, and alleged false statements on his application. However, none of these reasons legally rendered Sauer a prohibited person. New York enforced a good moral cause requirement for pistol permits, a condition that clashed with constitutional rights. While the Concealed Carry Improvement Act aimed to address such issues, New York continued to uphold stringent regulations. The pivotal New York State Rifle and Pistol Association v. Bruin decision struck down the good cause requirement, ushering in a text-based standard. Consequently, New York revised its approach, implementing a good moral character requirement. This shift prompted legal action, culminating in a recent court ruling. The presiding judge emphasized that the case wasn't about whether a state or municipality could establish valid army regulations, but rather the excessive discretion granted to city officials in denying individuals their constitutional right. The court found that such unchecked discretion lacked historical grounding in arm regulation traditions. Consequently, the judge partially granted Sauer's motion for summary judgment, affirming his rights under the first, second, and third causes of action, and declaring specific provisions of New York Code facially unconstitutional. The ruling also enjoined the enforcement of certain subsections of the code. However, the court dismissed Sauer's fourth and fifth causes of action without prejudice, allowing room for potential further legal challenges. The judgment dictated a stay on enforcement until midnight on October 26. While the ruling represents a significant victory for armed rights advocates, it is important to note that it allows room for appeal. The defendants have already requested a stay pending appeal, signaling their intent to pursue the case further. This decision underscores the persistent legal battle surrounding armed regulations and highlights the importance of ongoing advocacy for Second Amendment rights. The fight for constitutional freedoms in the realm of arms continues to shape the landscape of armed control laws across the United States. Legal victory for armed rights. The recent court decision in the case of Joseph Sauer brings to light a crucial aspect of the ongoing battle over gun control laws in New York. Sauer had applied for permits to possess rifles, shot arms, and arms in his home, but faced denials based on various cited reasons, including prior arrests, a questionable driving history, and alleged false statements on his application. Notably, none of these grounds make him a legally prohibited person. In response to this, the court has issued a partial injunction, effectively recognizing the unconstitutionality of certain provisions. The court found fault in the extensive discretion granted to city officials in denying individuals their Second Amendment rights, as well as the lack of historical precedent supporting such a broad application of armed regulation. However, it's important to note that this decision doesn't constitute an all-encompassing victory. The court still left room for appeal and extended a temporary stay of the injunction to allow the defendants the opportunity to seek a stay before the Second Circuit. This means that New York's controversial arm control measures will remain in effect, at least for the time being. The judge's refusal to conflate this case with other ongoing proceedings, such as the Concealed Carry Improvement Act, demonstrates a commitment to upholding the integrity of the judicial process. By asserting the court's autonomy over its docket, the judge reaffirmed the significance of each case's unique circumstances and legal implications. Looking ahead, it's likely that New York will pursue an appeal, continuing the legal battle over arm control measures. While this decision represents a step forward in recognizing the unconstitutionality of certain provisions, The ultimate fate of these laws hinges on future legal proceedings. This case underscores the broader issue of balancing public safety concerns with individual rights, particularly in densely populated urban areas like New York City. The ongoing debate over arm control remains a complex and contentious topic, with legal decisions like this one playing a critical role in shaping the future of arm regulation in the United States. The importance of a clear and unambiguous legal framework guided by the Constitution and historical precedent cannot be overstated in finding a just resolution to this ongoing controversy. Landmark ruling on arm rights. In a significant legal development, a federal judge, John P. Cronin, declared certain provisions of New York City's arm restriction as unconstitutional. The ruling centered on the discretionary power granted to city arm licensing officials, specifically in assessing an applicant's good moral character and determining if good cause exists for the denial of arm permits. The judge's decision is rooted in the belief that the level of discretion afforded to these officials violates both the Second and 14th Amendments of the U.S. Constitution. The Second Amendment protects the right to bear arms, while the 14th Amendment guarantees equal protection under the law. This ruling falls in line with a landmark decision by the U.S. Supreme Court in June 2022. The Supreme Court affirmed that Americans have a constitutional right to carry arms in public for self-defense. This precedent has had a cascading effect on arm restrictions across various municipalities, prompting legal challenges and re-evaluations. The specific focus of Judge Cronin's ruling pertains to New York City's criteria for granting or denying arm permits. By emphasizing the subjective evaluation of an applicant's moral character, the provisions grant an excessive leeway to officials, potentially infringing on citizens' Second Amendment rights. The ruling is a significant step in recalibrating the balance between arm control measures and individual rights. It underscores the importance of establishing clear and objective criteria for evaluating applications for arm permits. This decision places New York City in a growing list of municipalities whose arm restrictions have been deemed unconstitutional in the wake of the Supreme Court's groundbreaking decision. Moreover, Judge Cronin's ruling signals a broader conversation about the boundaries of arm control and the necessity for regulations that respect citizens' constitutional rights. Striking down provisions that rely heavily on subjective assessments of good moral character reflects a call for more transparent, standardized, and fair evaluation processes. This ruling may also catalyze a broader re-evaluation of arm control measures not only in New York City, but also in other jurisdictions across the United States. As legal precedents are established, it encourages lawmakers and officials to align regulations with constitutional principles while ensuring public safety. Furthermore, the decision underscores the evolving landscape of arm rights in the United States. The Supreme Court's 2022 ruling clarified and affirmed the right to bear arms for self-defense in public. This has sparked a wave of legal challenges and revisions to existing arm control measures at various levels of government. In supposition, Judge Cronin's ruling represents a significant development in the ongoing debate over arm rights and regulations. By striking down provisions in New York City's arm restriction, the judge asserts the need for clear, objective criteria in evaluating arm permit applications. This decision aligns with a broader shift in the legal landscape following the 2022 Supreme Court decision, highlighting the need for a balanced approach that upholds constitutional rights while ensuring public safety.
And comparing ammunition records against records of other databases. Refuse to surrender my right as governor to protect New Yorkers from gun violence. New York will now require and conduct background checks for all ammunition purchases, which identifies people convicted of felony.
The Supreme Court really made America a very dangerous place, particularly in New York City.
Supreme Court justices who feel incredibly emboldened, incredibly aggressive to move American law to the right, and they are not stopping.
Arm rights ruling. The recent decision by Judge John P. Cronin in Manhattan represents a significant development in the realm of arm rights. This ruling was the first major arm-related decision by the Supreme Court in more than a decade, a significant milestone. It stemmed from the notable Bruin decision, which invalidated a New York arm law. This landmark ruling had a cascading effect, prompting lower courts to also strike down various arm laws across different jurisdictions. The plaintiff, Joseph Sauer has had his permit application denied due to factors such as prior arrests, a questionable driving history, and alleged misrepresentation on applications. His case underscores the practical implication of the ruling. It affirms that officials must not abuse their authority when considering applications for arm licenses and permits. It is crucial to note that the ruling does not question a state or municipality's right to establish legitimate and constitutionally sound regulations pertaining to the issuance of arm licenses and permits. Instead, it emphasizes the need for such regulations to be administered with a balanced and constitutionally respectful approach. This distinction is vital, as it underscores that the decision does not undermine the state's legitimate interest in regulating arms. Judge Cronin's decision to stay the effect of the ruling until midnight Thursday was a judicious move. It provides the city with a reasonable window of opportunity to appeal the decision. This ensures that due process is followed and allows for an orderly transition, regardless of the ultimate outcome. It reflects the judicial system's commitment to fairness and thorough considerations of all parties involved. Overall, this ruling is significant not only for its immediate impact on arm regulations in New York, but also for its potential implications on a broader scale. It highlights the need for a careful balance between preserving citizens' constitutional rights and maintaining reasonable regulations for public safety. The Bruin decision has set in motion a re-evaluation of existing arm laws, prompting legal scrutiny and debate on the appropriate boundaries of arm regulation. In light of these developments, the Supreme Court's decision to revisit the issue of arm restriction in the upcoming year holds even greater importance. It will provide an opportunity for the highest court in the land to provide clear guidance on the constitutionality of such regulations, potentially shaping the future landscape of arm rights and regulations in the United States. Constitutional considerations. Judge John P. Cronin's recent ruling on New York City's arm restriction brings to light crucial constitutional considerations. At the heart of his decision is the assertion that certain provisions within the city's administrative code afford an excessive degree of discretion to licensing officials. This discretion, he argues, encroaches upon the fundamental Second Amendment rights of citizens, particularly their right to keep and bear arms. This assertion is significant in the broader context of the ongoing debate over arm control measures and their compatibility with constitutional rights. The Second Amendment of the United States Constitution, a cornerstone of American civil liberties, protects the right of individuals to possess arms. This amendment has been a subject of extensive legal interpretation and debate over the years, particularly in relation to the scope of arm ownership and the government's authority to regulate it. Judge Cronin's ruling challenges specific provisions of the New York City's arm restriction that pertains to the evaluation of an applicant's good moral character and the determination of whether good cause exists for the denial of arm permits. These provisions, he contends, have granted an undue amount of discretion to city officials, potentially leading to arbitrary and inconsistent decisions regarding arm permits. This raises critical questions about the balance between individual rights and the government's duty to regulate arms in the interest of public safety. Furthermore, Judge Cronin highlights the failure of the city to establish a historical precedent for the level of discretion granted to officials. He argues that such discretionary power should be grounded in a tradition of arm regulations that aligns with the intent of the Second Amendment. This perspective adds a historical dimension to the legal debate, emphasizing the importance of understanding the original context and purpose of the Second Amendment. A noteworthy aspect of the case is the clarity, or rather, lack thereof, in the communication between the city's arm licensing division and the applicant, Joseph Sauer. The judge pointed out that the notices Sauer received regarding the denial of his arm applications were deficient in explicitly stating the legal basis for the rejection. This aspect of the ruling underscores the importance of clear and transparent communication in matters as significant as the denial of a constitutional right. It's worth noting that subsequent to Judge Cronin's ruling, the city amended the regulation in question. However, the judge has not yet assessed the wording of these new provisions. This suggests an ongoing legal process that may continue to shape the landscape of arm regulation in New York City. The city has not immediately responded to requests for comment on the ruling. Meanwhile, Joseph Sauer's attorney, Amy Bellantani, expressed her satisfaction with the decision. She emphasized the rigorous constitutional analysis that underlies Judge Cronin's ruling, characterizing it as a substantial victory for individuals seeking to exercise their right to self-protection in New York City. This reaction underscores the broader significance of the ruling within the context of individual liberties and the ongoing discourse on arm control measures. Constitutional rights and arm permits. Judge John P. Cronin's recent ruling regarding Joseph Serraro's arm permit application sheds light on the nuanced considerations surrounding the application process and its alignment with constitutional rights. The city's contention that Serraro lacked candor due to the omission of prior arrests, including a charge of attempted murder, as well as a history of moving violations, forms the crux of their argument against granting him an arm permit. Crucially, Judge Cronin invoked the last year's Supreme Court Bruin ruling, drawing parallels between the vaguely worded good cause provision in New York City's rules and the proper cause wording that was invalidated by the Supreme Court in its previous decision. He underscored that the provisions in question granted an excessive degree of discretionary power to licensing officials, who were essentially tasked with making subjective judgments about an applicant's character, temperament, and judgment. This subjective assessment without the framework of an objective process raises significant concerns about the fairness and consistency of the evaluation process. The terms good moral character and good cause are inherently broad and open to interpretation. What one person deems as indicative of good moral character, another may view it differently. This level of unfettered discretion, as highlighted by Judge Cronin, presents a challenge in reconciling with the standards set forth in the Bruin decision. The need for clear and objective criteria in evaluating arm permit applications is paramount to ensuring a fair and consistent process that upholds both individual rights and public safety. The city's argument regarding Serraro's candor raises fundamental questions about the disclosure requirement for arm permit applicants. While transparency and honesty are unquestionably important in such applications, the determination of what constitutes material information that must be disclosed demands careful consideration. Striking the right balance between ensuring applicants provide accurate information and preventing an overly burdensome disclosure process is a complex task. Ultimately, Judge Cronin's ruling highlights the need for well-defined, objective criteria in evaluating arm permit applications. It emphasizes the importance of avoiding overly discretionary assessments that may lead to arbitrary decisions. The Bruin decision serves as a pivotal reference point, setting a precedent for the evaluation of arm laws and regulations. This case serves as a reminder of the ongoing debate surrounding arm control measures and their compatibility with constitutional rights. It prompts a broader conversation about how to establish a fair, transparent, and consistent process for evaluating arm permit applications, one that respects individual rights while safeguarding public safety. The challenge lies in striking the right balance, ensuring that the application process neither infringes upon constitutional rights nor compromises public safety. Public reaction and debates. The federal court ruling striking down certain provisions of New York City's arm restriction has sparked a range of public reactions and ignited debates on arm control and individual rights. Supporting of the ruling argue that it upholds the Second Amendment rights of citizens, emphasizing the importance of individuals being able to exercise their right to bear arms for self-defense and protection. They viewed the decision as a significant victory for those advocating for a more permissive approach to arm ownership, asserting that individuals should have greater autonomy in determining their eligibility for arm permits. Many proponents of the ruling also contend that the provisions deemed unconstitutional were overly vague and afforded city officials too much discretion in evaluating an applicant's good moral character. They argue that such subjective criteria could lead to potential biases and inconsistencies in the permitting process, potentially infringing on citizens' rights without clear legal justification. Conversely, critics of the ruling expressed concerns about its potential impact on public safety. They argue that the provisions in question were designed to ensure that arms do not end up in the hands of individuals who may pose a threat to themselves or others. Critics worry that without these measures, there may be an increased risk of arm-related incidents and violence. Some opponents of the ruling contend that it could create a more permissive environment for individuals with criminal backgrounds or histories of violence to obtain arms. They emphasize the need for thorough vetting and oversight in the permitting process to prevent potentially dangerous individuals from gaining access to lethal arms. The ruling has also reignited broader debates surrounding arm control policy in the United States. Advocates for stricter arm control measures argue that the decision highlights the need for comprehensive and standardized regulations to ensure that arm ownership is subject to reasonable and consistent criteria nationwide. Conversely, proponents of more lenient arm control policies view the ruling as a step towards dismantling what they see as overly restrictive and arbitrary regulations. They argue that responsible arm ownership should not be impeded by vague or discretionary provisions and that individuals should be entrusted with greater agency and exercises their Second Amendment rights. Overall, the public reaction to the federal court ruling reflects the deeply polarized nature of the arm control debate in the United States. The decision has amplified existing divisions between those who prioritize individual rights to bear arms and those who emphasize the importance of stringent regulations for public safety. Moving forward, the ruling is likely to remain a focal point in the ongoing national discourse on arm control, prompting further discussions, legal challenges, and potential legislative actions at both the state and federal levels. It will also serve as a pivotal precedent in shaping the future of arm control policy in New York and potentially influencing similar regulations in other jurisdictions across the country. The Second Amendment of the United States Constitution, part of the Bill of Rights, states, "A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." This succinct statement has been at the center of numerous debates, legal battles, and discussions about arm ownership and regulation in the United States. At its core, the Second Amendment grants American citizens the right to possess and carry arms. Its origins lie in the historical context of the American Revolutionary War, when a well-regulated militia was seen as crucial for the defense of a newly formed nation. The framers of the Constitution believed that an armed populace served as a safeguard against tyranny and foreign aggression. Over the years, interpretations of the Second Amendment have evolved, leading to varying perspectives on its meaning and implications for arm control. Advocates of expansive Second Amendment rights argue that it affirms an individual's inherent right to self-defense and protection. They contend that law-abiding citizens should have the freedom to possess arms for personal security and to deter potential threats. Furthermore, proponents of robust Second Amendment rights often argue that the ability to bear arms serves as a check on government power. They believe that an armed populace acts as a deterrent against governmental overreach and protects citizens from potential abuses of authority. This viewpoint emphasizes the importance of individual autonomy and the principle of self-reliance. Conversely, those advocating for stricter arm control measures argue that the Second Amendment was primarily focused on the collective right to bear arms within the context of a well-regulated militia. They assert that while citizens may have the right to own arms, this right should be subject to reasonable regulations to ensure public safety. Critics of expansive interpretations of the Second Amendment often emphasize the need for responsible arm ownership and argue for measures such as background checks, waiting periods, and restrictions on certain types of arms. They contend that these regulations do not infringe on the core principles of the Second Amendment, but rather balance individuals' rights with the broader interest of public safety. The debate over Second Amendment rights also extends to issues of armed violence, mass shootings, and public health. Advocates for stricter arm control measures highlights the need to address the alarming rates of arm-related injuries and fatalities in the United States. They argue that implementing comprehensive background checks, mental health screenings, and restrictions on high-capacity mags and assault arms can help mitigate the impact of armed violence. In contrast, proponents of expansive Second Amendment rights often argue that addressing armed violence requires a multifaceted approach, including improved mental health care, enhanced law enforcement efforts, and responsible arm ownership education. They caution against measures that may disproportionately impact law-abiding citizens without effectively addressing the underlying causes of armed violence. Ultimately, the question of Second Amendment rights continues to be a complex and contentious issue in American society. Striking a balance between individual freedoms and public safety remains a significant challenge, and finding common ground on this deeply divisive topic will require thoughtful consideration, open dialogue, and a willingness to explore evidence-based solutions. That's all for this video, folks. See you next time.